Imagine you as a humble worker, but the gods take your city to a completely different world. Now monsters invade, and he is the only one who managed to steal the magical power of the gods. The history begins with the first record made in the year 2023. It states that they were summoned into a different world. A large square hole opens in the center of the city. Other holes like this appear in New York, and in other places around the world. To be more precise, part of their city was transported to another world. In Record 103, it is stated that they were summoned into the game of the transcendent beings, also known as players. To be more precise, their city is one of the pawns in this game. Record 224, the players roll their dice and move their pawns. At each square they stop on, a mission is assigned to them, all equally difficult and painful. Missions such as battles, investigations, mazes, and many others. Everyone must protect the pawn until it reaches the finish line, which they do not even know exists. That is their role as those who belong to the pawns. Record 743, a man wearing grand armor was seated, clearly hopeless about something. He was one of the people living in Pawn 76, which had just failed. Sitting on a throne while jotting something down, he was surrounded by various bodies and weapons. When pawns fail, everything collapses, and just like them, those who inhabit them suffer the same fate. That is why he is leaving this record in his notebook. Lamenting, he says he does not know if this record will reach anyone, but he wishes that person to have a fate different from his, and that they should avoid going against the players at all costs. We can see a person shielding themselves from a building collapsing over their head. Some people were rescuing a civilian while he lamented internally, saying that no matter the level of skills or weapons. One of the transcendent beings raises his spear, while the man resigns himself, saying that they are merely units. The massive spear pierces through the city's skies. With that simple attack, it destroys everything, breaking one of the pawns on its board. After some time passes, his corpse is still seated in the same place, with only his rusted armor remaining. Unexpectedly, someone approaches him. The person picks up his notebook containing the record. After a brief read, he realizes the strategies are sound. Throwing the book to the ground, it becomes clear that this was not his first. Levitating his body, he acknowledges that he already knows all of this. The man looks at the great player standing before him. The being begins preparing to roll the dice again. Unexpectedly, he uses his spear again, cutting through another pawn. A mysterious smoke envelops the blade of his weapon. That mysterious man had stopped the player's spear with its hand, while declaring there is an exception. Suddenly, the place where he stood glows red, while the transcendent laughs madly. In the blink of an eye, the man is already beside the player, clenching his fist. He delivers a powerful blow to his face, causing a massive explosion. The being falls to the ground with half of his face disintegrated. As he regenerates his face, the mysterious challenger declares that it is possible to defeat the players. He summons an obscure book with red lights, explaining that anything is possible if you have a powerful guide. With a smile, he asserts that he will not obey blindly until he meets his end. Looking at the corpse of the other pawn, the man declares he will destroy the board and its players before returning to his original world. The skeleton glows as if satisfied. The warrior's body begins to dissolve as though there's nothing more he can do. With a proud smile on his face, the man remembers the dozens of lives that recorded their failures and suffering. Returning to his past, he recalls that it was a normal, peaceful day like any other. People were shopping and chatting casually in the streets. He was strolling calmly, listening to his music. But he admits that no one could have anticipated what was about to happen. In front of him, a kind of light began emanating from the ground. Confused, he looked at it all, unable to understand what was happening. A massive explosion occurred ahead of them, throwing everyone into panic and leaving them questioning it was a terrorist attack. The light traveled for dozens of kilometers, forming a kind of barrier around them. Still disoriented by the intense light, he tried to open his eyes. When he finally succeeded, Choi was startled by what he saw. Looking down, he realized it was as if he was standing on a giant platform. He wondered what it all meant as his city transformed into a game board piece. The people, still confused, tried to understand whether it was an earthquake or a terrorist attack. As a stereotypical hardcore otaku, he recognized that this was exactly what happens in the novels and webtoons he reads. To everyone's further surprise, a system window appeared in front of them. It announced that the game had begun and instructed the players to roll their dice. Observing the window, he became irritated by the mascot, questioning what it was talking about. A woman nearby pointed upwards in terror, drawing everyone's attention. Above them, something golden was descending toward the city. Looking at the object, he noticed something peculiar. It was, in fact, a giant die bearing various numbers. The die fell above the city but was stopped by a barrier. The system announced that it would move pawn number 3 spaces. With that, it became clear that the die had rolled a 3. This caused them to land on a square with the symbol of a shield. Suddenly, the platform began moving rapidly. The protagonist continued to observe everything, while the people were utterly shocked by the realization that the city itself was moving. Analyzing all the evidence, he concluded that they had indeed been summoned into some kind of game. However, it appeared they were not the players. In reality, they were the NPCs of this game. Still a bit frightened, Choi speculated that the real player was the being controlling the dice. Recalling his experiences with video games, the boy concluded that they were the characters chosen by the player. A bit confused, Choi wondered why the player had summoned the people along with the city. Suddenly, the system notified them again. The mascot announced that they were in a defense scenario and instructed the player to roll the die to determine the difficulty. The die was rolled again, setting the difficulty to level 1. The barrier was struck once more, and the die determined the mission time, which in this case would be 3 days. With that, a new location began materializing beside the city. It connected to the city's barrier. Still extremely frightened, the people debated how the ground could have moved. The system window notified them again, stating that the mission would begin shortly. From a bird's-eye view of the city, 4 bases were revealed, and it was explained that if all 4 were destroyed, the game would end. Also warning that, in the event of failure, the pawn will be destroyed, causing panic among everyone. People began shouting that this was absurd and demanded to be taken back. Removing his headphones, Choi concluded that they wouldn't be able to communicate with whoever was in charge. After all, if communication were possible, none of this would be happening. While the system window announced it would provide them with equipment, he realized he needed to understand the system. A die with various numbers was distributed to all the citizens, instructing them to roll it. Holding the die in his hands, the protagonist noticed it had 100 sides and that the number rolled would determine the quality of their equipment. To his surprise, a man shouted that something was approaching. They noticed several silhouettes running toward them, wondering if this was a rescue team. But in reality, it was a horde of monsters. Everyone panicked and started running, including the protagonist. The monsters passed through the barrier, heading straight for them. As they tried to escape, some people were caught, their screams echoing throughout the area. Choi kept running, but a monster with a club approached him. The creature struck him, hurling him away with a powerful blow. Injured, he realized this was the real reason they had been summoned along with the city, to protect the pawn. Choi landed among a pile of boxes. They were meant to protect the pawn, so it could reach its objective. This was a board game, orchestrated by beings who could be gods or demons. The ogre continued walking toward the boy after landing its first hit. But suddenly, a strong light could be seen approaching. A woman descended from the sky, bearing golden wings and a black spear. She planted her weapon in the ground, causing a faint orange glow. In an instant, this small glow turned into a fiery tornado, drawing the monster's attention. The massive tornado annihilated everything in front of the protagonist. The monsters screamed as they were swept away by the wind infused with fire. The people who had been trying to flee watched in awe, still injured but deeply impressed. They saw the heroine and wondered what kind of power this was and who she might be. This was Go Hiju, an ordinary level 1 citizen wielding a legendary spear. She instructed everyone to roll their dice and head toward the defensive line formed by the military at Namsan Tower. Holding the object in their hands, they questioned if this was what she meant. As they rolled their dice, she explained that they might receive some equipment and should retreat if they obtained common grade items. But anyone who rolled equipment above the magic class must stay and help her. Some people did receive equipment, noticing it was exactly as she had described. After equipping themselves, they decided to follow her instructions, as another horde of monsters approached. The protagonist later remarked that this was the day they ceased being ordinary people and became extraordinary. Recalling all the bodies, he said that the first day of the new year was marked by countless deaths. But, in exchange, many heroes were born. Still lying among the boxes, we see that the protagonist was just an ordinary level 1 citizen. With the die still in his hand, he acknowledged that this was on the 8th pawn. His die fell onto the system window spinning. He recalled that it was on that day he became the strongest, as his die glowed on the number 100. As a book materialized from the die, he remembered this event was called the worst nightmare to ever occur. It was the book of the demon king Christina, granting its user access to the entire library of the being that covets all things. The book glowed above the boy. However, Christina was the embodiment of selfishness, meaning all information obtained through the text could only be seen by its holder. 3 hours after the start, there were already 3,000 dead, 7,000 injured, and 1 base destroyed. The white-haired girl wondered if it was truly over. Some of the people fighting alongside her began to celebrate, claiming victory as a military truck approached. Drawing everyone's attention, the truck came to a sudden stop. Someone exited the vehicle, announcing they were with the Korean army. The soldiers began directing all injured individuals and civilians to board the truck so they could retreat to Namsan Tower. A soldier saluted Go, acknowledging her significant effort. Kwon thanked her for her help, explaining that now that the army and police were organizing, they would be able to position themselves at various locations. She asked if the mission was complete, but he informed her that due to poor communication, they were still trying to manage the situation. The surgeon explained that they were using short-range radios, which meant it could take some time to gather reports from across the city. Kwon suggested that for now, everyone should head to Namsan Tower. Suddenly, someone shouted no. It was the protagonist, holding his book, declaring that it wasn't over yet. With blood still dripping from his forehead, he announced that the boss was about to arrive. As he flipped through the pages of his book, he explained that it contained all the details, duration, progress, and even data about the monsters. Turning the book toward them, However, unlike him, neither of the two could see anything written. The girl wondered if perhaps only he could read the book, but the soldier remarked that it seemed to be just an informational book. With a suspicious look, Kwon began to suspect the book was incredibly powerful. After all, information is power. He asked Choi if he could provide them with more details, and Choi agreed. The book was rather grotesque, covered in multiple eyes and something resembling flesh. Choi remarked that the helmet worn by the sergeant was part of a set of 6 items in total. As for Go, she wielded a legendary tier weapon, and surprisingly, her favorite song was Chill Gap Mountain, which slightly irritated her. Both acknowledged that the book was indeed capable of revealing vast amounts of information, even uncovering personal details. The soldier noted that if the book's claims were accurate, a boss monster was indeed approaching. Kwon stated that he would contact headquarters and asked the protagonist to wait for a moment. As he looked at the pawn, someone remarked that if the world was truly a game, Choi would probably be considered a bug character. After all, every challenge in this world seemed effortlessly easy for him. It was as though the developer had identified a bug and confined it, and that if Choi ever managed to escape one day. But the scene returned to the present, with someone calling the protagonist. It was the sergeant announcing that he had received authorization from headquarters. Handing Choi a radio, Kwon explained that this was a significant gamble, but for now, they would rely on the information he provided. Still somewhat nervous about the situation, Choi looked at the soldier. He took the radio as the sergeant urged him to share as much information and as many countermeasures as possible. The protagonist tested the radio, asking if they could hear him. He began explaining that from now on, he would provide all mission-related details. He informed them that their mission was to defend the bases against waves of monsters, which would attack every 6 hours. At the end of each wave, a boss monster would appear. Victory would be achieved if they defended the base 4 times a day, 12 times by the end of the 3 days, and defeated the final boss. He emphasized that the book contained plenty of information and that if they devised a solid strategy, they could survive together. Choi added that after it was all over, he would search for a way to return them to their original world. Looking at the situation, the white-haired girl seemed slightly puzzled. She noticed that he wasn't just focusing on their current predicament, but was also considering what would happen afterward. Suddenly, the 3 of them paused for a moment and took deep breaths. Then Choi declared that it was time to begin. With a certain regret, the protagonist admits that he should have checked a second time back then. What he failed to see while he was unconscious was this. The book had created a contract involving the sacrifice of sovereignty. It would monopolize all rewards from those with whom the information was shared, as well as from anyone who managed to uncover the information. The book recorded the name of every person to whom the information was provided, whether directly or indirectly. This meant that even individuals who hadn't heard the information directly from him would be affected by the sacrifice if they learned of it through rumors or other means. As long as the information originated from him, all the rewards would be delivered to him in the end. The 3 of them prepared for the battle ahead. Finally, the boss appeared, a massive 2-headed monster wielding enormous swords. The protagonist instructed the soldier to shoot a specific spot. Kwon hit the monster's head, causing it some damage. The glow emanating from the boss's weapons finally subsided. With that, Choi urged Go to attack. She quickly launched herself at the monster. With a powerful strike, she managed to pierce a hole in its abdomen. Her hair shone like vivid orange flames, and her blade radiated a strong light. Noticing all this, she was stunned. A bit confused, Go looked at her now orange-tinted hair. Both Kwon and Choi nodded at her in affirmation. Smiling, she nodded back in satisfaction. High above, the Demon King Krasina overlooked hundreds of drops scattered around. A man lay asleep, chained to a rock. Suddenly, the man opened his eyes, revealing a third eye on his forehead, and announced that there were 193,000 people in total, with 176,000 sacrifices. With a wicked grin, the Demon King noted that 91% of the population had been marked as sacrifices in just a single day. He declared that this marked the beginning of his endless sins until the end of the game. With a broader view of pawn number 8, we can see the 2 interconnected worlds. The protagonist notes that the defense mission truly resembles a match from a strategy-based game. Another horde of monsters was approaching. Just like in games, the monsters moved toward the bases, and the players had to devise a strategy to stop them. Suddenly, lights began to shine from the rooftops, drawing the attention of the monsters. The protagonist gave the order to attack, prompting the soldiers to launch a barrage of missiles at the monsters. Afterward, while the missiles were being reloaded, other individuals attacked the monsters from a distance. Since level 1 monsters lack intelligence, they struggled to handle the situation. The defenders positioned themselves, launching ranged attacks and forming a barrier. This tactic allowed them to steer the monsters towards specific paths. Injured, some monsters strayed from the horde, only to be ambushed by humans lying in wait. In the blink of an eye, those monsters were sliced into countless pieces. This was thanks to individuals equipped with rare items, capable of utterly destroying destroying the creatures. Choi continued giving orders, directing reinforcements to areas where they were most needed. The protagonist glanced at the book, explaining that it provided him with real-time information. It contained any knowledge he sought as long as he thought of it and turned the next page. He concluded that it was an excellent tool for providing long-range support. After some time, the city remained in chaos, with fires raging in many areas. Countless monsters had their heads pierced by bullets. Kwon instructed one of his subordinates to inspect the area while asking another to report everything to Choi. He stood still, silently observing the chaos around him. The sergeant noted that over time, it no longer required the commander's approval, as if Choi himself had assumed command. Sighing, Kwon apathetically surveyed the situation. Watching the protagonist, Kwon recalled being told that the book only contained information. He wondered if Choi was managing the entire city purely through his natural talent, or was this yet another ability of the book? The protagonist approached the sergeant, calling out to him. With a smile on his face, the boy informed him that it was nearly over. Kwon asked if the third wave's boss was approaching. Choi confirmed this, assuring him there was no need to worry. While Go slept, Choi remarked that she would handle everything in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, the white-haired girl woke up, still disoriented. In front of her was a massive monster made of earth and grass. She had been sleeping in the bed of a military truck, which was speeding away from the monster in desperation. Irritated that no one had woken her, Go began to speak, but Kwon interrupted, explaining that they had run out of signal flares and had resorted to throwing a grenade at the monster. The grenade exploded in the boss's hand, leaving it confused. The panicked creature began slamming its hand repeatedly on the ground in an attempt to extinguish the flames. Everyone was startled by its immense strength, and the protagonist noted that if the monster entered the city, the bases would be destroyed. The truck came to an abrupt halt. The protagonist explained that the good news was that the monster was extremely slow and had no resistance to any elemental attacks, making it easier to fight. Go remarked that it seemed like they were the only ones present, but the protagonist surprised her by stating that they wouldn't be the ones fighting. Shocked, Go listened as Choi told her that she would face the boss alone. Suddenly, the monster let out a massive roar. Go took her position with her lance, asking what she needed to do. Choi explained that if she fulfilled the requirements, they might unlock a hidden resource and items above the heroic level. From his book, it was clear what conditions Go needed to meet, and 2 of them had already been fulfilled. The protagonist explained that unless they uncovered all the conditions, they wouldn't be able to unlock the hidden resources. Smiling, he added that his book revealed the conditions for all items. Against the backdrop of the setting sun, Go prepared herself. She asked Choi if he was truly certain about this. Choi reassured her to trust him in the book, promising that everything would work out. Grumbling, she admitted she didn't feel great about the plan, even as she raised her lance. Then, with a shout proclaiming her trust in him, Go drove the lance into her own stomach. The monster raised its massive hands, preparing to strike her. With a powerful blow, it smashed the ground, sending fragments of stone flying through the air. Kwon yells the girl's name while the protagonist calmly assures him everything is fine. Unexpectedly, a red light begins to emanate from various directions. He explains that all the conditions have been fulfilled. A hidden ability of the lance is activated, and a massive fire dragon emerges before the monster. Both Choi and Kwon are astonished by the immense power on display. This ability allows her to summon the Dragon of Prominence once per mission. A powerful attack strikes the boss, causing the ground across the area to crack into countless pieces. The explosion was so massive it could be seen and felt from within the city. The sergeant mentally notes that such an ability poses a significant danger if used in an urban environment, but then he considers the true danger, Choi's book. He concludes that the book holds far too much information, and if misused, it could lead to the city's destruction. Watching the protagonist assist Go, Kwon assumes it's a relief that the book is in the hands of someone like him. The system announces that the mission has been completed, and that all citizens outside the city will be transported within its walls. It also announces that rewards will be distributed to the surviving citizens as the crowd begins to revere the trio. Individual rewards were also distributed, leaving everyone further amazed by the resemblance between this world and a game. Everyone received rewards, whether for surviving or contributing to the mission. Even nurses who aided the wounded received rewards related to their profession. With a relieved smile, the protagonist realizes that the injured are safe, but both Kwon and Go sense something strange. The trio notices that all the points have been redirected. The system announces that the points were claimed due to the sovereignty sacrifice effect. Outraged, people begin to protest, confused and begging for their points back as others are dying. Desperate, Go asks Choi what is happening, but he explains in utter confusion that he doesn't know either. The system begins calculating the number of points he will receive due to the sovereignty sacrifice. Simultaneously, all the status screens start pinging. The system announces the top scorers of the mission. 3rd place, Seo Unsuk. 2nd place, Kang Sungwon, and 1st place, Choi Yul, leaving the protagonist completely stunned. Afterward, everyone begins to look at him with suspicion. In an instant, the crowd's mood shifts to one of murderous intent against him. The enraged mom advances toward him as Go tries to calm them down, but they accuse Choi of having won the points from the beginning. Terrified, the protagonist places a hand on the surgeon's shoulder, exclaiming that he has no idea about this ability. Kwon, however, calms him down, saying the priority now is to care for the wounded. With some suspicion, he asks if the protagonist can redistribute the points among the people, affirming that he could if he hadn't taken them intentionally. Awkwardly, Choi agrees to try. But as he looks at the status window, he notices a passive ability of the Demon King prevents him from sharing or donating points. Hearing the people shouting and calling him a demon, demanding their points back, Choi questions what this ability might be. He tries to purchase healing items to distribute among the people, but is once again blocked by the passive ability. Furious, he throws the book to the ground, begging Go to burn it. Following his instructions, she attacks the book with her lance, trying to incinerate it. Choi insists that this should work and attempts to redistribute the points again, but the book regenerates above his head. Even more terrified and enraged, he sees the book reappear, completely intact. Frightened and trembling, he collapses to the ground, leaving both Go and Kwon shocked by his reaction. The protagonist hears countless people begging for points or pleading with him to save their loved ones. Throughout the city, voices curse and revile him. Someone informs the surgeon that the citizens are becoming increasingly violent and that the death toll continues to rise by the moment. Panting heavily, Choi desperately searches through the book for a way to bypass the passive ability. But suddenly, to his surprise, he feels a weapon pressed against the back of his neck. It's Kwon, who orders him to stop, saying this is the best solution. He continues saying that this is the best way. Kwon informs Choi that from this moment on, he is under arrest. While Go keeps trying to calm the people, they scream fervently that he should be arrested but executed as a traitor. The surgeon approaches Choi and whispers for him to flee and find a way to resolve the situation. This leaves Choi utterly shocked by the soldier's words. Clenching his fists, Choi accepts Kwon's order. Opening the system, he allocates his points to agility as the crowd accuses him of plotting something and insists he be stopped. In an instant, Choi vanishes before everyone's eyes. This only infuriates them further. Surprisingly, everyone's system begins to ping. The notification warns that they have only 24 hours until the next round. Seeing the notification, everyone is deeply alarmed, lamenting how little time they have. Kwon orders everyone to move to the safe zones. Go remains still in the middle of the street while the soldiers transport the injured to vehicles and guide the civilians. She silently gazes off into the distance. The soldiers begin directing people into two groups. The group on the left is for those willing to fight, while the right is for those wanting to evacuate. They also urge everyone to frequently check their status windows and not leave the evacuation center. A volunteer explains to an elderly man that he must memorize the locations of temporary bases and other evacuation centers. The guards also warn that if anyone encounters Choi, they must run as fast as possible, report his location, and cover their ears to avoid hearing any advice from him. One guard draws symbols on the ground while warning others not to hide it if they are victims of the sovereignty sacrifice. Still sketching the circles, they caution that anyone caught hiding such information will be punished as lawbreakers. Kwon, along with a few soldiers, is planning how they will defend against the next attack. Meanwhile, Go is training her body to grow stronger. Civilians are hiding with their families. Each person does what they think is right, whether it's fighting for items or praying to their god. And so the new round begins. The system prompts the player to roll their die. It announces that Pawn 8 will move 4 spaces forward. The system reveals they are now within the Demon King's seal and demonic pillars will appear alongside their guardians. If they fail to destroy the pillars, the Demon King will be summoned and annihilate everything. A new table appears, detailing the time settings, the number of pillars, and the difficulty of the Guardians. The trial will last 5 days. There will be 3 pillars in total. The Guardians will have a level 1 difficulty. The first Guardian is a lost fallen angel, the being wandering in search of its lost destiny. Like the second pillar will also have a level 1 Guardian. The second Guardian is the Mad Brain, a creature that endlessly creates and improves its inventions over time. However, the third pillar has a level 3 Guardian assigned to it. This revelation leaves both Kwon and Go astonished as they view the notification window. A massive blood-red light and aura radiates from the third pillar. This Guardian is the Goblin Swordsman, a being who has reached the pinnacle of martial arts and seeks to undo the Demon King's seal to challenge him. Lying in his circle, the protagonist stares at the ceiling. Suddenly, a faint smile forms on his lips. To the surgeon's surprise, he is informed that the civilians have initiated an attack. They were attempting to fight the fallen angel. A soldier tells Kwon that they tried to stop them, but the civilians were uncontrollable. Acknowledging the situation, Kwon decides they must act as well and asks what Go plans to do. Only then does he realize that she is nowhere to be found. A bit uneasy, he admits to himself that everything has become a complete mess. Meanwhile, standing before the swordsman, Go prepares for battle. Kwon assumes that all their perfect cooperation and combat strategies have unraveled in a single day. Go readies herself to face her newest foe. Seeing a blue aura emanating from her opponent, she concludes that this must be the level 3 Guardian. Transforming, she charges toward him, declaring that she must kill him before he can harm anyone else. She lands a powerful attack, causing a massive explosion. To her surprise, the monster doesn't even flinch. He simply raises his sword and blocks her attack. With a single hand, he swings his blade. In an instant, her transformation vanishes and she is sent flying backward. The goblin's sword glows blue as he stands with his head lowered, never once looking at his opponent. Swinging his sword, the goblin swordsman delivers a strike aimed at splitting the girl in two. The force of the attack was so immense that the entire area was cleaved along with it. Surprised, the goblin raises his gaze and notices something. Someone was calmly approaching him. It was the protagonist who had saved Go. She was clearly overjoyed to see him return. He asks her if she could deliver a message to the others, leaving her puzzled. Choi tells her that all the rewards they had earned were used by him, further confusing and shocking her. As he advances toward the Guardian, the protagonist instructs her to warn everyone never to cross his path again, otherwise they will be robbed. He extends his hand and summons the book. Still walking, he admits to himself that there was no other way to return the rewards to the people or rid himself of the book. He opens the statistics store and the system informs him that his level will increase for every stat allocation. The system asks which stat he would like to increase, but with a smile, Choi declares that he wants all stats maxed out. This shocks the white-haired girl, who checks her status window. Similarly, everyone else, including Kwon, is astonished when the system notifies them that Choi now has all of his stats at maximum. As he observes his body, feeling the surge of power, Choi wonders how many equipment dice he has gained as a result. He orders the system to discard all magic class dice and automatically roll those that guarantee heroic equipment. The system informs him that he has received 142 legendary items and 1023 heroic items. The system also notifies him that all obtained equipment will be marked. As Go watches in amazement at the unfolding events, the protagonist internally resolves to use this to his advantage. After all, he cannot discard it. He decides to use all the bloodthirsty rewards and the power of the Demon King. Meanwhile, the goblin smiles as he observes his new opponent. A powerful red aura radiates from Choi's body. Now fully exuding a badass aura, the young man declares that he will protect the entire city and find a way to return to his original life. With a smile, he states that if this is the only way to atone for his sins, he doesn't mind being cursed by the people. The system notifies him that the goblin swordsman is smiling, preparing to face a powerful opponent. Choi activates the air magic shoes, allowing him to float as if flying. He apologizes to his opponent for not fighting him yet. With a great leap, he promises to return soon and asks the Guardian to wait for him. Confused and uneasy, Go wonders if he is truly leaving. But unexpectedly, the monster sits back down and covers its eyes. Watching this, she questions whether the monster will genuinely wait for him. Observing the swordsman, Go realizes he truly is the guardian of the pillar. The protagonist traverses the city, destroying every structure he touches. As he heads toward the other guardian, Choi notes that the swordsman does not strike first and only moves after being attacked. He is heading toward the fallen angel, who notices his presence and turns around. But, unexpectedly for the monster, the protagonist steps on its face and drives his sword into its neck. He gazes at the scene with a faint smile on his face. While crushing the guardian's head, he remarks that he must face the others first. The people who had been fighting the fallen angel start cursing Choi, shouting for him to die. However, they all fall silent when they realize that the battle unfolding before them is far beyond what they can comprehend. Choi remarks that the unique traits of a pillar guardian can be unlocked if certain conditions are met. Some traits add weaknesses. Still battling the guardian, he recalls that fulfilling the conditions incorrectly can make a guardian stronger or unlock a new form. The fallen angel begins to strike at him with its arms at high speed. Skillfully, Choi deflects the monster's attacks, remembering that if the creature kills 100 humans, it will evolve into a fallen angel of human destruction, abandoning the pillar and focusing solely on annihilating humanity. Choi raises his sword as he prepares to deliver a strike. Cutting off both of the angel's wings, he declares that he will deal with the nuisances first so he can obtain the skills necessary for the mission. The monster starts plummeting toward the ground. As Choi descends toward the angel, he explains that it's not about completing the mission, but how the mission is completed. He sets his sights on the aureole above the monster's head. Below them, a military truck is speeding through the city. Kwon orders the soldiers to tell everyone to stay 500 meters away from the pillars to ensure Choi's intentions are clear. Looking out the window, Kwon wonders if the protagonist truly hasn't found a way to return the rewards. Thinking back to the young man, Kwon concludes that Choi doesn't seem like a bad person, even though he knows decisions can't be based on feelings. He reflects that someone as intelligent as Choi, wielding this much power, could dominate the city in the blink of an eye. The sergeant remarks that even Go, who is comparatively easy to deal with, is becoming uncontrollable. He continues to question whether they will be able to survive this mission as the protagonist battles the angel in the sky. Suddenly, something puts them on high alert. A massive explosion of red light occurs beside the truck, sending it flying. The truck begins to roll over, throwing several people out. Kwon wonders aloud what just happened as his soldier approaches him. In front of them, the Guardian lies on the ground, with Choi holding its wings. They notice that the protagonist is completely unharmed. The fragment of the sword of divine slashing, the one that once divided the heavens and the earth, but now is just a fragment of its true power. Opening his system, he transforms parts of monsters into equipment. The surgeon approaches him, asking if he managed to defeat the pillar, expressing his surprise at seeing him there. With a slight smile, showing respect for the surgeon, the boy nods. Suddenly, he leaps again, leaving them with a corpse behind. The surgeon notices that he doesn't say anything, probably due to the sovereignty sacrifice skill. His frightened subordinate asks the surgeon if the pillar's guardian was really defeated, to which he confirms. But then he interrupts himself, saying that apparently the monster is still alive as the fallen angel raises its head, looking at the men. The system notifies that the condition to unlock the special feature has been met, tearing off the fallen angel's wings and halo. It also informs that the special feature corruption has been unlocked and the fallen angel will transform into another being, a beast that lost its faith and fell into sin, for God no longer looks upon this being. Beast of corruption, difficulty 2. Seeing all of this, Kwon assumes that military life truly sucks. Suddenly, the Guardian jumps out of the place where it was. Some soldiers are walking peacefully through the streets as there are no monsters except at the pillars. He understands that there are only 3 monsters in the mission, which means they are powerful enough to be equivalent to entire hordes. With that in mind, he starts shooting at the corrupted beast. While questioning whether the protagonist will leave such a monster for them to face, the surgeon orders them to call for reinforcements. Suddenly, the beast jumps toward the soldiers. With great difficulty, the soldiers manage to dodge a massive attack launched by the Guardian. The soldiers run desperately, with the system notifying them that the fear status has been added. The surgeon looks horrified at his soldiers, begging for their lives so desperately that he can barely recognize them. But this only makes him angrier, grinding his teeth. He draws the beast's attention so that his soldiers can escape, firing his weapon in an attempt to lure it. He runs, deciding to buy as much time as possible until reinforcements arrive. The Guardian leaps toward him, leaving the surgeon completely horrified with fear. Looking at the monster charging toward him, he accepts that he must hold on until backup arrives. But shattering all his hope, the monster simply crushes him into the ground with its paw. He is completely flattened by the overwhelming strength of the monster. Suddenly, we can see the Demon King's book. Closing the book, he assumes that he has taken care of one. Suddenly, in the place where the surgeon had been, a green glow begins to emanate. The light begins emitting electrical shocks, causing the beast to lift its paw. With this, the hidden skill for the hero's helmet is fulfilled. The ghost skill of Helden is activated, causing the user to be possessed by the ghosts of the heroic Inquisitor. With this, he gains a 10-minute lasting skill, providing various buffs. The monster becomes confused, seeing what stands before it. Suddenly, the fanatic skill is activated, causing the dead or fallen soldiers to rise and charge at the Guardian. With this, all the abilities held by Kwon are transferred to everyone who is part of his group. The protagonist, trembling, admits that this is even more terrifying than he imagined. The surgeon remembers when he was given a car, wondering if it wasn't too much of a privilege for someone his low rank. His superior admits that he likes courageous people like him, and that a sergeant being as courageous as a commander is quite interesting. He looks at the man a bit confused by his words. While writing with a very elegant pen, the commander informs that he barely has any information about the current situation, and that in moments like this, they need a calm observer, someone calm and rational like him. While attacking the beast alongside his soldiers, he remembers that they need someone who never loses their composure, and that only a cold and rational observer could make logical judgments in unexpected situations. Still thinking about the commander's words, he can't stop, ordering his soldiers to reload and charge forward. They begin using their firearms as blunt instruments to strike the monster. Others use the knives at the end of their weapons to slash at it. On the other hand, he uses his captain's flag to pierce it from above. They finally finish off the monster, while remembering the commander's words, saying he was the perfect person for this. Everyone is notified that the Guardian of the first pillar has been defeated by the independent shield-bearer squad, with their leader being Kwon. The protagonist admits he was right and that the pillar's guardian was so exhausted that the surgeon's squad was able to defeat it. He explains that even after transforming, the monster's HP remained the same, easily being defeated by Kwon's squad. Additionally, after transforming the creatures into corrupted beings, he managed to make his contribution extremely small, with most of the credit going to Kwon, giving him more rewards. With a smile, he looks to the side and asks someone what they think of this. The goblin swordsman is extremely confused, staring at everything happening. He comments to the Guardian that not being able to speak was very frustrating, but at least now he can listen. Still sitting in front of the monster, he asks if the Guardian would like to make a bet, and if he wins, he'll break the Demon King's seal. With this, the swordsman looks at him with a mix of irritation and curiosity. Suddenly, a spear imbued with fire appears. It is Go attacking an anti-human machine. She cuts through several of these robots while moving swiftly across the battlefield. Clearly tired, she explains that after receiving the rescue call, she managed to reach the second pillar. However, no matter how many she destroys, it seems there is no end to them. Not to mention that they are always evolving. The girl decides she must use a powerful skill before the Guardian becomes stronger. She tells her companions to retreat from now on. Irritated, they ask what she's talking about since they all need points and she's the only one with a legendary item. One of them, attacking a machine, says he needs points to save his family and won't let them die so easily like last time. Two men, hiding while carrying crossbows, prepare to attack the Guardian. They position themselves to shoot at the Guardian, convinced that they will defeat him on their own. However, to their misfortune, the monster simply turns around and stares at them. Both freeze in fear, startled by the sudden turn of events. With this, he launches a large attack toward the men, but Go manages to stop it with her spear. Even struggling to hold back the Guardian's attack, she was greatly affected. A large explosion occurs, causing people and debris to fly in all directions. With much of her clothing and skin burned, she remains standing after defending the massive attack. She tries to tell them to run as fast as possible, but to her surprise, they are already doing so, shouting desperately. A bit embarrassed, she begins to laugh at the situation. The monster looks at her, trying to analyze her. He realizes that she could be a potential threat. After that, he finishes his analysis and creates a machine specially designed to fight her. Looking at all of this, the girl is surprised, realizing that he's creating a new machine. All the other monsters look in one direction. He leaps toward the girl, trying to corner her. With great difficulty, she tries to defend against the attacks of her enemies, but is still hit in several places. With a certain confidence, she assumes this is one of the best situations as she activates her transformation. With a single attack, she manages to destroy several machines. Regaining composure, she prepares to attack the Guardian. Extending her hand to launch her weapon, she tells everyone to retreat as quickly as possible. She delivers a massive strike toward the monster. They run desperately as the girl's spear tears through the sky, leaving an orange trail behind. The Guardian was still building the machine after the analysis. After the attack finally hits the target, an explosion consumes the area, causing a loud crash and brilliant flash. Even while trying to run, her companions feel the impact of the explosion. With some satisfaction, she begins to laugh, thinking that everything is over. But to her surprise, the Guardian is unharmed, surrounded by some kind of shield. The robot the Guardian had worked on was finally finished, an anti-Go machine and being made specifically to defeat her. Seeing all of this, she is surprised at how specific this was. Before she could even finish her thoughts, the machine appears right behind the girl, attempting to attack her. With great difficulty, she manages to focus her spear to try and block the attack. The monster strikes her, and despite her defense, she can't withstand the force. Completely drained of strength and hope, she looks to her side in confusion. Before her vision fades, she sees a red blur rushing toward the Guardian. In literally the blink of an eye, the monster has his head decapitated. It was Choi, who had removed the Guardian's head in a single strike. While questioning what he was doing, Go can only see him walking away as her vision fades. Still reeling from the impact of the attack, she is sent crashing through the park, destroying several trees. The custom-made machine walks calmly toward her. To the being's surprise, Go isn't in the place of impact, only a trail of blood remains. It begins to track the girl's trail, trying to find her. The now headless Guardian remains on the ground. The system notifies that the unique creature Mad Order has been created, significantly improving the manufacturing quality of the robots. Suddenly, a large structure begins to emerge from the sky. The protagonist assumes that the pillar took longer than he expected and that most people are hiding out of fear. At the first portal, some people are trying to destroy it while complaining about its resistance. At the second pillar, a strong red light emanates from the top while everything around it is set on fire. Some people are fighting, asking to take the wounded. To everyone's surprise, some military trucks start approaching. However, the protagonist assumes he could take care of everyone quickly. But in order to win this game, he needs to focus not just on the mission ahead, but on making the entire city stronger. For that, they first need to find a commander capable of guiding them. Moreover, they need a hero who will give them hope. Opening her eyes, the girl with white hair wonders if she is truly alive. Turning around, she asks if he was the one who saved her. But in front of her stands the goblin swordsman, looking at her with some disdain. Frightened, she starts backing away as the Guardian tells her to shut up. A bit awkward, she starts to apologize but quickly pulls back, scared, and asks if he can speak. Ignoring her question, he asks if the girl treated her wounds, since they need to start as soon as possible. He informs her that Choi said something to him. Pointing his scabbard at the girl, he says that after a big defeat, finding a teacher and cultivating is quite the cliche. She remains confused, not understanding anything he's saying. Suddenly, something flies through the sky. It was the robot hunting for Go. The monster had managed to track her and was closing in. In an instant, it changes its path and attacks the ground. But in reality, it was attacking a protagonist who, smiling, says that it had been tricked again. He had an item called Crazy Brain. which allowed him to confuse monsters with machine attributes. The monster says it has located its target while summoning another attack. Choi enters a building while calling out his opponent. The creature launches a massive attack, causing a powerful explosion. The blast was so strong it went through the building. People were still attacking the pillar, but suddenly, to everyone's surprise, a monster's attack hits the pillar. Now it was completely destroyed. While the machine tries to understand what happened, the protagonist assumes that this amount of damage should be enough. With a sarcastic smile, Choi thanks the monster and asks if they can go back to playing tag. In the dark night, the sound of metal clashing can be heard. It was the goblin with Go, exchanging attacks. The swordsman tells the girl to use that power. Doing as asked, Go uses her transformation. The master adjusts his hat and tells her not to forget. He says that this power doesn't belong to her, so she should only use the amount she can control. While defending her attacks, Jack tells her not to let the power control her. On the contrary, she must control it completely. Trying to understand what she's being told, the girl jumps while undoing her transformation. Determined, she observes her master. After some time, still at the pillar. Breathing heavily, Go asks the swordsman if Choi had made a bet that she would defeat the robot. Curious, the girl asks if that's possible, but the goblin only remains silent. A bit nervous, she says that this isn't very encouraging. Suddenly, the swordsman asks her why she let him train her, whether it was to become stronger or because she trusted Choi. Go confesses that she doesn't really know the reason, leaving the goblin intrigued. She tells him that there are many things she doesn't know about this new world and that she isn't smart enough to figure them out on her own. That's why she wants to strengthen her body to learn things as she goes along. While stretching, she says that she has always lived like this. Her master gives a slight smile. He says that initially he thought Go was being used by Choi, but in reality, she was just a martial artist. With that, he grins widely, deciding that from now on, he will take the training seriously. 3 days pass since the mission began. Dozens of people are hiding in the subway station. Some argue, questioning whether they should go out and help. Interrupting their discussion, someone calls everyone's attention to a strange noise. To everyone's surprise, the ceiling of the station breaks open and a strong light pours through. It was the robot made to face Go. It scans the people while searching for its target. The monster causes a powerful explosion, declaring it has located the target. It fires several attacks while saying that Go must be annihilated. Fragments of metal are thrown into the air. In reality, it had attacked the crazy brain. The robot looks clearly confused. Unexpectedly, the ceiling breaks open again. Seeing this, some of them complain about whether this is true. The robot watches the intruder as the people say that this isn't possible. They call her an angel even though she has horns and wings more like a demon. The system notifies that she has fulfilled the conditions of the special event Student of the Master Swordsman. As a reward, she acquires the heroic level equipment Ember Illusion Armor. Choi asks the goblin why he gave Go a female piece of equipment, but he replies that it was the only one he had. While watching the battle, the protagonist asks the master about their chances of victory, to which he answers that they should be 50%. Still observing the battle, the goblin mentally assumes that the robot is Go's natural enemy. On the other hand, she now possesses her own knowledge. The monster recovers after being thrown back. In an instant, it fires several missiles towards the girl. As the attack heads toward Go, the master mentally speaks, wondering if the seed he planted will blossom in time. The old junk will no longer be her enemy, and the girl uses her passive skill, increasing her proficiency with sure weapons. After 3 days and 15 hours since the mission began, the first pillar was destroyed. The surgeon and his subordinates are running toward one of the pillars. After 2 hours, the guardian of the second pillar was also defeated. Now, after 4 hours since the second guardian's defeat, Go finally defeated the last monster, piercing it with her blade. The people inside the station grow nervous as they look at each other confused. After some time, 4 days had already passed since the beginning. To Kwan's surprise, the girl appears with several people supporting her. With that, she had brought the rest of the population back into the battle. After a little more time, the second pillar was finally destroyed. At this moment, people begin to believe in themselves again. They believe they wouldn't even need Choi to complete the first mission. While flipping through his book, Choi states that at least that's what they thought. The master calls his attention, saying that his student has won and fulfilled their part of the agreement. As they look up, the protagonist asks if it is now his turn. After some time, the military is distributing food and weapons. On the radio, the commander says he sent Kwan to inspect the area and he returned as a general. The surgeon apologizes awkwardly. Incredulous, the commander tells Kwan to leave the wounded under his protection and do as he wishes. He says he will promote him if he does well, but before the surgeon can reject the offer, the call is ended. With a sigh, Kwan calls out for his mother. Go approaches the surgeon, saying that they must begin. He asks if the girl will really be okay, and as she says her goodbyes to the people, Go replies that she promised her master. With a somewhat dark tone, she says she promised that they would be enemies the next time they meet. Worried, Kwan wonders if he will be able to win. The surgeon says that a monster strong enough to make Go powerless is frightening. also wondering what Choi is thinking. Suddenly, they hear a loud noise that terrifies both of them. Looking at the large structure floating above the city, they wonder if it's that. But then they see the protagonist. Unexpectedly, he strikes a strong attack on the structure. He lands another kick, causing a powerful impact. The attack was so strong that the structure begins to crumble. Leaving both of them speechless, the system notifies that the Demon King's seal has been destroyed by Choi, and that the mission objective has changed. Suddenly, something extremely evil begins to slither out of the seal. Several monsters looking very similar to angels emerge from the seal, and the system changes the mission to kill the Demon King. Many people curse the protagonist as they fall into panic. Both Go and Quan wonder what that psychopath is doing. Even the Goblin Swordsman admits he didn't expect something like this. As he draws his sword, the master says that there are many interesting humans this time. He leaps into the sky, preparing to deliver his attack. With a single movement, he cuts through all the monsters in the sky. Some of them try to attack him, but they are cut into pieces. Watching all this, both are terrified. While hovering above one of the monsters, the master tells Go that this is her final lesson and that she must give her best. Vanishing before their eyes, the goblin says that they will see each other the next time their calls cross paths. In a completely dark place, the protagonist lands calmly. He wore the fallen angel's halo, an item that gave him protection in the demon and hell realms. Koi walks toward the Demon King, noting that it was easier to get in than he had imagined. The protagonist catches the Demon King's attention. While the being glares at him with a terrifying face, Choi asks if the king knows someone named Christina. This was Kumbaba, the Demon King of Authority, who says he has never heard of that name while asking how a human got in. Koi places his hand on his chin, assuming that apparently Demon Kings don't talk to each other. He turns his back while leaving, saying that it was apparently a waste of time and that this will take longer than expected. Choi apologizes to Kumbaba for interrupting his meal, but asks him to wait as his true opponent is still coming. The Demon King awkwardly scratches his cheek. He launches a large attack, saying that this is embarrassing. With that, the protagonist wears a hungry look. The Goblin Swordsman enters the room where the Demon King is. He lands while holding his hat. As he adjusts it on his head, the master sees something that leaves him startled. There was a lot of blood in front of the Demon King. On the other hand, Choi stood facing Tumbaba while blood spread through the air. The protagonist had torn off the monster's arms. With a smile, the boy says that his body moved on instinct and asks if this isn't against the rules. Tumbaba becomes confused and angry, asking how a human could do this. Choi apologizes, saying he made a mistake. Regenerating his arms, the Demon King casts 2 spells while questioning how a mere human could dare. Noticing the goblin's presence, the boy asks if he doesn't want to switch places, which the master doesn't deny. As the monster prepares to attack, the swordsman says that apparently his opponent wouldn't appreciate the switch. Taking the attack, Choi says that everything went wrong at the last moment. As he is thrown by the force of the impact, the protagonist thinks that if the goblin swordsman fights on equal footing against the Demon King, the condition for the special event, the fate of the martial artist, will be fulfilled, leading the goblin to mutual destruction. This would cause the rewards to increase drastically, making the citizens receive tons of points. Before he could finish his thoughts, the Demon King falls on top of him, causing a massive explosion. Koi finds himself face down while Tumbaba presses him with his paw. But with this, his armor, Einherjar Battle Jacket, activates, boosting his defense based on the user's HP. The Demon King delivers several attacks against him. At this moment, the protagonist realizes there is nothing more to do. He continues taking the attacks, deciding that he must wait for the people to accumulate points and end it all at once. The goblin watches the beating from a distance. With some discomfort, he remains still. Outside the seal, several fallen angels are being defeated. The soldiers are shooting at the monsters while trying to defend the people who were evacuated inside. Quan watches the whole situation in silence. He notices that overall, those monsters don't have much combat power, but they are in great numbers. And unfortunately, they won't last long. Still shooting at the monsters, Quan says that Choi has become the enemy of the entire city's population after breaking the seal. Go is on top of a car, trying to reach somewhere. As they approach, one of them says that the rescue signal is coming from that direction. With that, she jumps off the roof and heads toward the signal. She uses her transformation while attacking the enemies. After this strike, several monsters fall, completely charred. She calls out to the citizens, telling them that this is the way. The people pass by her, cursing Choi for breaking the seal, but this makes Go angry. She sighs, disturbed by what she's heard, but someone approaches her, asking if she'll let this slide. It was a girl named Kang, who calls her cold for letting people talk like that about her boyfriend. Embarrassed, Go denies it desperately, and the girl accepts what she says. With a suspicious look, Kang claims that this is good news. She throws the snack she was eating to Go. The girl says that it's a thank you for the heroine saving them and escorting them to the safe zone. Placing her hand over the package, Go notices that only half of one piece is left. Suddenly, several fragments begin to fall. It was the master swordsman who had just defended the boy. The goblin tells Choi to step back. With a smile, the master asks if the protagonist is starting to like him, making him feel completely disgusted. To make him even more uncomfortable, the goblin says that if they had met in another life, they might have even had a drink together. Leaving the boy behind, the master heads toward the Demon King. Still angry about what he just heard, Choi admits to feeling a little sorry. Watching the battle unfold, he says that he won't even be able to activate the martial fate. As he places his hand on his face, he admits that even if he did, he would feel guilty. Unexpectedly, the system announces that his friendship with the goblin swordsman has reached the maximum level, and Christina's hidden ability has been activated. Confused, he opens the book to try to understand the ability. After reading something, he smiles knowingly. Jack was very injured but smiling, saying that he really is a demon king. In front of the master, Kimbaba stood with his eye glowing scarlet. Tightening his grip on his sword, the goblin says that it's time to make his final move. He thinks to himself that this attack puts his life at risk. Opening his eye, which shines blue, the master says he will do this in the name of his friend and disciple. But to his surprise, the protagonist leaps and completely destroys the demon king. The goblin is shocked by what he is seeing. Kimbaba groans in pain, questioning if this is possible. He is completely obliterated, and the system notifies that the demon king has been destroyed and that Choi was the greatest contributor. Witnessing such power, the swordsman remains frozen in place. The system announces that all summoned monsters have been destroyed, but Jack has not disappeared. The protagonist smiles as he looks at his friend. Recruitment of lords, this ability allowed him to make a contract as long as friendship or fear were at their maximum. The system asks if Choi truly wants to sign a familial contract with the goblin swordsman Jack. As he falls from the former seal of the Demon King, the protagonist realizes that he is hated by humans and allied with a monster. His book contains information about the swordsman Jack. For some reason, Jack is smiling while saying he's increasingly far from being human. The system again distributes the points, placing Choi in first place once more. Someone is watching go from atop a building. It's Kang, who watches her silently. Looking up, the girl notices Choi and wonders if this is the Golden Man. Her face is revealed as she questions whether he might actually be some sort of trigger for a bomb. Severely injured, the surgeon is lying on the ground, admitting that he doesn't understand much about games. Even so, he understands that you need to defend a base against large hordes of enemies. He continues apathetically, trying to comprehend the situation. Kwon wonders if a single person could be a supreme being. He questions whether such an existence could even be possible or allowed, one so powerful that it could easily kill a demon king. The system notifies a player about an irregular unit that has been detected. With that, Choi and his statistics are shown. He asks the Transcendent to choose the action to be taken, with the options Annihilate, Restart, Delay, and Summon. The being decides, pointing its finger toward the chosen action. Unaware of anything, the protagonist continues to smile nonchalantly. The player selects the option to Annihilate. Suddenly, Choi is surprised by something. He looks around while falling from the sky. Landing on the ground, he questions whether it was his imagination or if he was really being watched. To the Transcendent's surprise, the system notifies that the command could not be executed, returning to the previous menu. The player uses the status window again to inspect the protagonist. Even more surprised, he is notified that the selected unit cannot be analyzed. The Transcendent continues trying to analyze Choi. Back in the city, people were extremely happy to have earned points. A man announces that he will reveal the results of the reward data research. He explains the differences in the data and that there are 7 types in total, each with different numbers, and that items, tools, and weapons are randomly produced according to the numbers drawn. Kwon had just received a Destiny Spoon, which had the amazing ability to always return to its owner and remain clean. A little discouraged, he admits that a good class doesn't always mean a good item. He notices 2 people happily negotiating a shield and a knife. In addition to them, there were many others recruiting for the next mission. He starts to recall a conversation where he asked the girl if she was really going out alone. Ghost says yes, as she has no talent for military life. She also mentions that many people are hiding in fear, and she must help them. Trying to reassure him, the girl says she will help with the mission so he doesn't need to worry. Mentally, Kwon presumes that everyone is adapting to this unrealistic world. The protagonist smiles from the top of a building. He notices that things are going very well for the rest of the people. The heroine, along with the military, is already positioned. But anyway, the most important part begins now. If his plan goes wrong, the entire city will be devastated by its own citizens. While Choi is lost in his thoughts, someone approaches him. It's Kang, standing behind him. She greets him while the protagonist analyzes her status. Feeling a little nervous, he looks at his book, trying to figure out who she is. He asks what the woman is doing there, but the girl says she just arrived, leaving him even more surprised. Suddenly, she begins to approach him, making him feel even more uncomfortable. With a frightening look, Kang assumes that she thought he would be crying from loneliness, but she affirms that apparently. Confused, he asks what she's talking about, but the girl changes the subject. She says that anyway, today isn't the day, but she will come back. He asks if she will appear again and what the reason is. Approaching, Kang says that apparently he can't see everything through the book. Not quite understanding, he simply confirms. As she heads toward the edge, she says that this is good. Leaving Choi even more surprised, she states that she just wanted to see his face. As she jumps, she says that she wanted to see the face of the person who had the power to dominate everything, but chose the hardest path. She simply disappears into the mist, leaving the protagonist very confused. Still staring at the long rope among the clouds, he remains disoriented, not understanding what is happening. There was a day with a blue sky and only a few clouds. However, suddenly, the status windows of everyone start beeping. The system announces that the city has progressed to level 1 and that new features will be added. Now you could choose the size of your status window, add and block friends, and make messages and calls. In addition to this, the city's infrastructure will be partially restored. In the Demon King's book, it is stated that the more citizens spend experience, the higher the city levels up. He questions whether the points he spent did not influence the city, especially considering how much he had used. Choi thinks for a moment. Looking at the book, the protagonist wonders where the points he spent went. As he imagines being manipulated by the Demon King, Choi questions whether it's right to keep using the book. It is possible to see the second lieutenant's badge. The commander was appointing Kwan while mocking his face. Surprisingly, Kang was watching everything, assuming that apparently the military isn't doing too badly. Looking at all that, she questions where she could go to feel more comfortable. While various data were in boxes surrounding the bodies of soldiers, the girl says that this is a very dangerous city. Elsewhere, Choi was sitting, thinking about something. Interrupting his thoughts, the system announces a new round, informing everyone that they have arrived at the trap of the Golden God, and if they do not satisfy the Golden God, failure will be declared. The mission would be level 2, containing 4 maps and 2 weeks of duration. Kwan assumes that he didn't suspect the measures could change. The system explains that they must find the treasures and bring them to the city for evaluation. People are happy about the fact that this time no monsters are entering the city, and they've earned something even without contributing. The Golden God was a large orc, but ruining everyone's joy, the status tab announces that only individual rewards will be distributed. Looking at her system window, Go notices that this mission has many descriptions. Activating her transformation, she says she will skip this for now. The girl decides to check the entire map before starting a mission. The protagonist was still on top of the building, watching Go quickly cross the city. With a smile, Choi says that the heroine is lucky when it comes to rolling dice. Looking at the city, the boy assumes that if everything goes as planned, by the end of this mission, he will complete his construction plan. Until then, he will use Christina's book. A sword begins to emerge from the book. Surprisingly, it pierces him, leaving Choi in shock. He is startled, not understanding what is happening. As if it were an illusion, the book closes, leaving the protagonist confused since nothing is actually piercing him. Suddenly, a status window announces that there has been no sacrifice for sovereignty since the last mission. Unexpectedly, he feels a sharp pain in his chest. The Demon King Christina punishes him for laziness, warning that if he doesn't offer a sacrifice, he will experience intense pain, losing HP continuously. Increasing his punishment even more, it is notified that if he doesn't offer a sacrifice by the end of the mission, the user will die. The map to which the pawn was connected had a large tree at its center. In Sector A, amidst a forest, some people discover an unregistered dungeon. One of them is happy about the possibility of profiting either by reporting it to the army or exploring it themselves. He begins to ask what his friend plans to do while drawing his sword. Everyone raises their weapons, exclaiming that they will become legends now that they are in another world. But suddenly, a loud noise is heard coming from the dungeon. A round silhouette of some kind of spikes begins to emerge from the dungeon. They prepare for battle, saying that it seems to be one of the big ones. As they threaten the monster, Choi steps out from the dungeon filled with loot. In a very scary manner, the protagonist begins to say that the treasure is the real boss. He starts explaining how to deal with the monster, leaving everyone terrified, trying to cover their ears. With a crazy smile, the boy starts saying that there's also a hidden room. A little later, in a luxury hotel, someone slams the table in frustration, complaining that they've become sacrifices for Choi. One of them yells angrily, saying that this is not fair. His friend tells him that they can't do anything against a guy like him, they should just stay calm and wait for the mission to end. This is an isolation made only for the sacrifices of sovereignty. Many people discuss where they were caught. Still irritated by the situation, they call the protagonist a devil. Remembering Choi's face, they admit that they didn't care about the punishment, but they say they didn't want to benefit him, so they went back to the camp. Everyone says they can't let the boy manipulate them. The system notifies Choi that the Demon King has reduced his punishment as he is somewhat satisfied with the over 2,000 sacrifices. Extremely angry, the boy looks at the book, confessing that at least it's somewhat bearable now. He questions the fact that the book doesn't reveal all the information about itself. The protagonist stays seated, feeling considerable pain. But with a smile, he admits that this was part of the plan for unexpected events. He also notices that apparently, the Demon King thinks he has control over him. After that, he says that at the end of the mission, Christina will see who is really in charge. Back to the present moment, Choi looks up while waiting for the creature that owns these giant eggs. He was in Sector B, inside the Emperor Griffin's nest. The Emperor Griffin is a level 3 monster with an additional challenge if it's in its nest. The bird moves toward him, attempting to attack. Suddenly, we see Go's spear hitting something. She was facing a level 2 rock troll. The girl remembers Jack telling her that power was not created to be controlled. On the other hand, one must give it freedom, letting it take its own path. After defeating the monster, Go thanks her master. With a serious face, she warns that her disciple has grown stronger. Looking to the side, she notices Kang's presence. Go approaches her, calling her Miss, but the woman asks her to speak more casually. With that, the girl curses at the woman and asks why she's following her. While spinning a dagger, she says that following Go brings many benefits. The girl is left speechless by the way Kang said that. Looking Talking to the heroine, the woman asks if she's really going to abandon someone as fragile as her. The white-haired girl gives up and leans against a rock to rest. Go sends a message for someone to come retrieve the treasure. They are being watched by more monsters. Noticing the small bag the girl carries the treasures in, Go realizes it's too small for someone who followed her all day. She asks Kang how she evaluates items if she hasn't taken them back to the city. She replies that she only takes what she thinks is good enough, leaving the heroine even more confused. Looking back, she says she uses her eyes, but feels a little embarrassed and admits that even though the girl is strange, she is very cool. Kang asks about her friends, but the heroine says she dismissed them and cleared the monsters from the path. As they walk, she asks if Go really doesn't know anything. Confidently, she says that in this mission, the monsters are not their enemies, but it's not as peaceful as it seems. In reality, this is an individual fight that pits people against each other. The treasures aren't claimed until they are negotiated. As a man is attacked, Kang says that there are evil people who prefer to fight against humans rather than monsters. In a hotel, only one window was broken and the light was on. Inside the room, the police were investigating a crime scene. Suddenly, a detective named Siu appears, surprising the other officers. He asks if this is another treasure theft case. His colleague explains that yes, and according to the victim, he suddenly fainted, and right after that, his treasures were gone. Siu notifies that they should have delivered the treasures directly to the god of gold, and his other colleague says that it's a bit slow for that. He explains that it usually takes about 1 to 12 hours, as if the system itself were asking people to steal from each other. The detective gets irritated, asking what kind of interpretation that is, and with sarcasm, he says it was quite human. The other police officers discuss whether the guy is crazy for injuring the department's brown bear. One of them yells Choi's name, but the other says that it's not him. Suddenly, the protagonist appears riding an emperor griffin. He tries to greet them, but Siu grabs his head. The detective uses his legendary fist. With the attack, a large hole forms. The man who had been arguing up until that point orders his subordinates to evacuate the entire area and issue a Choi alert. He notices that the detective attacked even though his level and equipment were inferior, making him worthy of the position he holds. But he would be very happy if this position were taken away by the protagonist's hands. Confused, the man stops attacking. Seeing Choi's reaction, who didn't even try to dodge or seem surprised. Hey everyone, did you enjoy this story? I really liked it. If you want to follow the next part, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. See you in the next story, guys.